Hello, hello. How are we all doing? Firstly, I think I will start off by this and saying I've actually never done this before, so I apologize if this all goes horribly, horribly wrong. Um, yeah, so I'm trying to slowly figure this out. But yeah, hello. Hope everyone is doing well. The logic behind this and the reason why I've started doing these, it's very simple. Basically, I've been getting so many messages and stuff. I'm feeling incredibly guilty that I've not been responding to as many as perhaps I should. And so what I wanted to do was basically set up this forum where people can actually come on, ask me any questions. I'll always have a few topics to talk about, things that I've noticed over the past few days. But the general idea is just to answer any questions, open book, anything work, business, myself, if anyone's even vaguely interested in that. Not something I talk about a huge amount, but just in general, kind of cover everything off. So I thought I could start off by telling you a few things that I've noticed that, just general musings, as it were, around things that I've noticed. So where am I from? So originally I'm from, I live in London. I actually grew up in Greece for 10 years, lived there because of my dad's job. And then actually moved over to a place called Suffolk, which is obviously East England. And then actually sort of moved across from there to London and sort of been here since uni. So I'm about 32 now. I say I'm about 32. I am 32. So yeah. Good evening, Ben. Huge fan of your channel. Thank you so much for your amazing content. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Yeah, it's been a weird journey. Been doing it for 18 months now, and it's certainly gone in a direction I never really thought it would. So, yeah, very, very grateful. Good evening, Ben. I worked in a pharmacy and I was bullied out of a job. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you're doing okay. Um, What's your view on trade unions? As with everything, I think they serve an important purpose. A lot of the things that we have are very much down to trade unions. Weekends, paid holiday, things like that. They're a part of working life, and they're an important part. In regards to, yeah, so please do ask any questions you want in the comments. Like I said, I've got no real structure beyond a few things I wanted to talk about. And so please do just ask away. I will try and answer as best I can. And if you like these, please let me know because I will keep doing them. And if you absolutely hate them, I will stop. I am completely yours to talk through now. One of the first things I wanted to talk about actually was this, which came across it, right? And it's an article in the BBC, and it's basically about work-related mental health conditions. And I found this really interesting because it's very much work-related, right? This isn't just people who've got mental health issues or mental health problems in general life. This is things that are directly caused by their work or being exacerbated by work. And look, we all know what the spike is, right? So 500 out of 1,500. It got to 500. COVID happened, awful time, really struggled with everyone. And then actually keep going up. And I found that really interesting because it's not a good sign, right? We can't keep kind of doing this. Thanks, Ben. Where do I stand because they're bad mouthing me to others? So Marcella was booked out. So Marcella, this is about you being bullied at a pharmacy. I mean, obviously, it's unacceptable if you've been bullied down to it. It's so not okay if they're bad mouthing you. It's really hard, by the way. I really do struggle without knowing like the real context behind stuff. It's really hard for me to comment on the real details. But from what I've seen there, that just sounds terrible. I'm really sorry you're going through that. Hi, Ben. What's your take on ex co-workers staying in touch, even though they're now with rival companies? Would it bug you if you were the boss? No, not at all. Like literally not at all. Genuine, honestly, if there's a boss that really worries about that sort of stuff, like there is some privileged information, I'm sure, and I very rarely, right? There's very rare, like truly like privileged, like secrets, as it were, that you shouldn't be allowed to say, but you should be able to trust people to know what the line is and stuff, because without breaking their contracts, to be able to remain civil and friends with people in rival companies. I have absolutely zero issues with anyone doing that. Certainly wouldn't bother me. And I would say it's a bit of a red flag if it bothers them beyond the obvious, right? If you know like actual information, just don't tell them anything too specific that they can pass on. But if you're friends, you probably wouldn't do that anyway. So yeah, I think treating people like an adult is a pretty good tip in general. Marcel's asked, would you ever encourage your own employees to block your number when they're on vacation? I mean, it sounds a bit extreme, but like blocking your number, just because you never know, right? There could be things. I'm not saying, I'm as anyone who's seen my content, I'm not a fan of people being bothered on annually ever. But it seems crazy to completely remove all ability to ever contact them at all. I think you just need to not bother them in the first place. So, because it's not like a sort of weird reaction where you just have to bother them, right? So, I would just say, look, go enjoy your holiday, we'll handle this. Make sure you do a proper handover, all that sort of stuff. Like, have a structure, have a process that everyone should follow, and it's on you as the employees to follow that as much as possible. But in general, I would just keep going like that. What can people do to stand out in this really tough job market, struggling to get work right now? Thanks. Yeah, it is tough at the moment. I think we're going through one of those stages, right, where companies are just making efficiencies. That's the phrase they use, and efficiencies often as the main sort of cost is often in salaries. Efficiencies often mean like they're sort of reducing team size and things like that. And the challenge sometimes is a lot of people go through that. And so what you end up doing is basically ending up with that scenario where, so I'll move that back so you can actually see me. Basically, you end up with that scenario where people are just struggling, right, to find work. So what I would say is I always go after small and medium-sized businesses. I would really like go out after the HR people and the owners and just say, look, here's my CV. This is what I'm looking for. Because one, they tend to be a little bit more flexible. And two, I just think there are better recruitment processes going through. I think you're just dealing with more real people rather than these sort of really arbitrary AI-powered big corporations that basically just sort of really sort of slash sort of 40, 50, 60% of CVs before they even remotely get close to a human. So that would be my advice. I really do advise looking at small to medium-sized companies. Do you think that zero-hour contracts and job agencies should be abolished due to regular management abuse of employees, including punishment for 6 days and constructive dismissals being rife? Again, like, look, this is a broad topic, right? My opinion is a lot of these structures are fine, but they get abused. Like, I'm not a fan of zero-hour contracts. I'm just not. I just don't really see why you would need them beyond the obvious, right? Whether you should like just start abolishing job agencies and things like that, that sounds a little bit extreme. If I'm being honest, I'd much rather we just have a structured process with which they can actually operate, and there's sort of punishments for the bad ones and, rewards and praise for the good ones. Hi Ben, is it silly for me to be scared from getting a job due to discrimination? Is it silly for me to be scared from getting a job due to discrimination? I'm really sorry, I don't quite understand that question. If you have a way to rephrase it, I'm sure that's me being slow. Ben, I wish you were my boss, or you could give me classes on how to be a better manager boss to my supervisor. Well, I'm writing a book, if that helps. So please do keep an eye out that for next year. But that's very kind. Thank you, Kate. And I'm sorry you're going through that with your boss. How do you deal with colleagues pressuring a member of staff to work Christmas? We only have one day we are open, and I booked it off as I don't have childcare, and now my teammates are kicking off. Yeah, that's tough. That is a tough one, right? Because if you do need someone in the business, someone has to be in the business. That's kind of just how it works. I know lots of companies do prioritize, during like summer holidays and Christmas and Easter's and like the holidays, like people with kids do get priority. I personally don't have a huge problem with that because I kind of get it, right? Not least because certainly for like summer holidays, for example, it's often more cost effective if you don't have kids to go out for like those core weeks. But that's really tough, right? You've booked it off, and it's not fair that just because you don't have children, you have to work that Christmas. So I think in that particular case, I think it's just as long as everyone's followed the process and you've got it signed off first, I think that's fair enough. So I think it's harsh to put you under pressure for that. Alex, how would you encourage co-workers, all new starts, including me, to go into the office? All recently started this job and 99% remote, but I think having a group going through the same thing is good. Yeah, I mean, look, anyone who's seen my content knows I'm very pro flexible working. And people always think I mean remote when I say flexible working. I don't. I literally mean flexible working. And what I mean by that is how it works with my company. It's 2 days in the office, 3 days from home. But the office is always open. So if you do prefer being that person who just likes that routine of going to the office, it's always yours to do it. But we do say those 2 days that we go into the office, we all go in together. I think that just kind of makes a little bit more sense as well, because otherwise you just go into the office and no one's there. And if you're not kind of going to the office at the same time, it kind of defeats of where the benefit of the office actually is. So we do say 2 days in the office, but we will go in on those days. And 3 days you can work from home, or you can come into the office if you want. In regards to encouraging, I think you do just have to encourage. I mean, it depends, right? 99% remote, they could be miles away. So there needs to be a logistical challenge too. Second, like if people signed up for a remote job, you can't really then make them start coming into the office. You can't make them. So you have to like pitch it to them in a way that sort of makes it beneficial for them. So I would just really focus on the pros and sort of talk them through why you'd like them to do it. And I think that would be a pretty good way of approaching it. Um, how do you manage to ensure your rights when the company is a one-man band, i.e. the boss is the be-all and end-all, no supervisor HR? Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, the one advantage is you get access to the person making the decisions. But obviously, if the person making decisions is a person you're struggling with, I totally understand that is a real challenge. The honest truth is, like, it depends what you mean by rights. I would always just consult a lawyer if you can. But generally speaking, it starts off with like talking to the boss, because often, and I do mean this, right, entrepreneurs don't realize they're breaking rules or infringing on any sort of laws at all. Like, it's often, and I'm not excusing it, but it's often from like a place of real ignorance, rather than sort of like deliberately going about it. So I would just sort of bear that in mind. I would start by talking to them. If there's anyone else you can talk to in the business, that's always helpful as well. Otherwise, you have to go external. But I would, before you like go, once you go down that step of like going legal or something with any scenario, and this works with like clients, it works with like business in general, that you can't really like untap that keg. So like you always want to try and make sure you maximize all options out before that. Any advice you could give, as I have mild autism and have been looking for employment since leaving college back in 2021, but having no real luck? Well, I'm really sorry you're struggling. I suggest that perhaps it's probably like, it depends what stage you're failing at, right? So if you're kind of getting through to the final stage and just being a bit unlucky, or if you're just not even getting a sort of callback from the beginning, if you're not hearing anything back from applications, I suggest it's probably to do with your application and your CV and something like that. If it's around interviews where people are sort of falling down there, and perhaps people for whatever reason aren't buying into the way you interview, I would try and ask for feedback. I really would. I would ask, say, look, I really appreciate you taking the time. Like, some HR managers are really good at this. They're really happy to give like really proactive, like helpful feedback in regards to how you interview. So it depends which part of the process you are. But I'm sorry you're going through that. Which 3 leadership books would you recommend to an aspiring colleague? I don't look. This is really embarrassing. I read a lot. I do read a lot, but I don't really read nonfiction. So I don't really tend to read the sort of leadership books. I'm very sort of insular in regards to where my content comes from. But my content's amazing, right? Because my content comes from, basically, I have, like, people send me stories. Obviously, I get the people ask me questions, which I respond to, and then people sort of tag me and reacts, and that tends to be like my 3 sort of main content pillars. I do have a new series coming out, which I'm really excited to share with you soon, where I basically go about finding the best bosses in the UK. So I'm looking forward to sort of sharing all of that with you. But in regards to recommendation of leadership books, I'm afraid I don't know. Why don't you name and shame businesses? Yeah, look, this is a question I get a lot, right? And I do think so. There's 2 main reasons. The first is protecting the anonymity of the person who's actually shared the story with me, because sometimes they're still at the business, and like my worst nightmare is like accidentally outing someone in that capacity and sort of like putting them in a place where their job's at risk, or like even like causing like issues in their workplace and things like that, because that's not what the purpose of my channel is. In regards to like naming and shaming, I'm very aware I've got quite a substantial channel now across social. And if I was to just come out and name a business and name a boss, when a lot of people are doing the same things, it feels a little bit unfair to me. I know that sounds silly, right? But the whole purpose is to call out the theme. So like, to try and get everyone to kind of recognize that some of the stuff that's happening is not okay. And some of it's idiotic, right? Don't forget, like, a lot of my content's not necessarily, it's about sort of calling out terrible behavior. But I also always maintain it's about running a successful company as well. Like, if you want to be one of those, if you want to run a successful team or manage a successful company or grow and, revenue and all that sort of thing, I always say, look, following my content is a pretty good start. Like, no one ever thinks they want an unmotivated team or an unhappy team or anything like that. So the idea that they can't do that, it for me has always been silly. But I'm very aware, if I named someone, it would cause a bit of a pylon. And I'm very aware that that's not really the purpose of the channel. My channel is not there just to kick people. And I know some of them deserve it, right? I'm fully aware that some of the behavior is utterly reprehensible. I do know a lot of them see it. If I'm being honest, I don't know if that helps. I know a lot of, like, often there's enough in the circle, they'll sort of recognize and sort of share it with them. So I know for a fact certain bosses have seen it. But in regards to like just causing general thing, again, that's not really my place to do. How do you feel about fractionalization between your employees and employees of a company you're in a contract with? I currently work for a company that has a very strict no fraternization policy. Oh, I see what you mean. So as in basically no hooking up at a company. it's a weird thing. Like, everyone's an adult, right? As long as everything, as long as there's not sort of anything too, I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's going to happen anyway, if I'm being honest. If certainly if it's a big enough company, like, and anyone being to like a Christmas party or something, like, knows it's inevitable, especially if you've got a lot of like perhaps younger people in their 20s who don't have like partners and stuff like that. So I think it's weird to have a no fraternization policy, but obviously you need to sort of be careful with all these types of things, as they are professional relationships and they very rarely end well. Have you heard about the scandal involving Musk and Tesla suing Sweden? What do you think about all of that? I actually haven't heard of that yet, but I will look into that because Musk has certainly been in the news of late. So I will check that out, but I'm afraid I haven't actually seen much about that if people want to share that with me. Do you have advice for people with a high level of qualifications and diverse experience across different sectors in terms of job searching? Yes. So if you've got like a really broad CV, so if you've done a lot, tried out new things, I like that. Firstly, I think it shows you've got the experience. And I think what I like about that, right, and one of the best lines you can use is, look, I've tried loads of different things, and therefore I know what I like and what I'm looking for. And that's why this job appeals to me. So, like, play to your strengths. You've had loads of experience. So use that experience. Say, look, I'm confident. I know what I want, and this is what I want, and this is what I like. And even with a diverse sense of experience, you can always pull threads on, like, so it could be management, it could be leadership, it could be organization, it could be client work, it could be, getting on with, there's always themes within that where you can say, look, if I can do this across 4 or 5 different sectors, I'm really good at it, right? If I can project manager across 5 companies, I'm really good at it because I've got all that diverse experience. So I like a broad CV. I think it's a really sort of illuminating element to it. And that's how I'd approach it. Excited to hear about your new book, Ben. When will it be available and what's it about? I'm not allowed to give too much away, but it'll be out next September. It's basically a collection of all the different stories that everyone's shared with me over the years, with my sort of perception on where the sort of big challenges in work at the moment, and also trying to be quite funny. And I hate to use that word because that's terrifying, and people can call me out in the comments saying I'm not funny. But I don't like work taking itself too seriously. I think it's important to kind of recognize that, we're all here to enjoy things as much as possible. So that's all I'm going to say. Whether that's giving you anything away at all, let me know. Do you have any pointers on re-entering the workforce after a stroke? I'm 42 and they're not familiar with re-entering after a major health event. Well, firstly, I'm so sorry to hear that, Miles. I really hope you're doing okay. Secondly, there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to like worry about. I would just have in your seat, if you're out for a significant amount of time, which I'm sure you were after such a major issue. Like, firstly, I hope you're okay and ready for work again. Secondly, I would just own that, right? So 42, even if it's been like 2 years, you've still got presumably, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years of work experience before that. Just play up to that and just say, look, this is the scenario. This is my experience up until now. I obviously had to take X amount of time off for this health reason. However, I'm back. I'm keen to work and all of that sort of thing. So, firstly, don't think you've got anything to hide at all. But secondly, just own the fact that happened to you and that you've come through it. And I really hope you're doing okay. Any advice? I have a steady, safe, reasonably paid job, quite easy, little stress, but zero chance of promotion. This may be where I am forever. Not sure I'm comfortable with that. I mean, it sounds like you're possibly a little bit too comfortable, which is kind of the problem, Andrew. Look, it depends where your head's at, right? Like, we all go through different stages in our careers where sometimes the career is the be all to end all, where we really want to push ourselves. We really want to try something new. We really want to kind of really sort of basically make it the big priority in our life. And there are other times where your professional life takes a backseat to your personal life. It could be kids, it could be things going on with health, it could be genuine, any sort of problem or challenge that you're going through. It could be a hobby. I've got someone who's like trying to run a marathon, like an ultra marathon, so having to train quite a lot, so their career's not a huge priority because they want to focus on that. Like, there's so many good reasons why you don't have to prioritize on your professional life. And at that point, having a nice, steady, reasonably paid job that's quite easy, little stress, that can be fab, right? It's a 9 to 5, just crack on. But it sounds like you're not quite there. So there's kind of 2 things you can do, right? Either you can start looking like things on the side, perhaps like to kind of monetize a hobby and sort of challenge yourself that way, or potentially I would consider looking for a new job. And not because that's a bad place. Like, I'm not being challenged is a very legitimate reason to find a new job, because you want to be challenged. You want about 20% of your job you want to have no idea how to do. Not more than that, because then it gets too stressful. But like, we get excited by the stuff we don't really know how to do, right? So if it's something we've done day in, day out, forever and always, and can do it in our sleep, that rarely gets the sort of juices flowing. So you really want to do that if you can. Do you find that a junior young staff are overly using AI to write their emails, etc., and it's noticeable because there's a weird, unnatural, and sincere feel to the words? What have you had to do to remedy? Yeah, look, I mean, AI is here to stay, right? How engrossed it becomes into day-to-day life is TBC. How much it involves, but yes, there's absolutely scenarios where people are using AI, and it's not just juniors and young stuff. To be honest, I'm getting a lot of like emails which have, and you're right, there's a really sort of stilted way to it. You can kind of tell it's not really human written. I think the challenge we're going to have with AI, right? Because it's here. We're going to use it. I think it's important to use it because I think in a lot of ways it's very, very useful and can save us all a lot of time. And so what I would say about AI is it's more important to like recognize critical thinking, because what you don't want, for example, is just take the junior young staff thing. I'm okay with them using AI to write emails, but I still want them to be able to actually write emails. And if they just completely use AI to completely replace that part of their learning, because understanding how to communicate is over email is kind of important, right? Like very few people have phone calls. Obviously, we have a lot of Zoom calls, but email is the primary source of communication. If you haven't got people who can understand how to do that, then that's not great. That being said, you're probably going to see more and more of that. So for me, it's about getting people to understand critically what they need to be doing and how to actually interact. That's going to be the sort of bigger priority. These are all absolutely really interesting questions. So please do keep firing them across. Hi, Ben. I have a story I'd love to share. I spent 13 years in retail fast food jobs before going to work in a factory. The difference in management style has given me some extreme emotional whiplash. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Very sorry to hear that. If you want to sort of elaborate, I can try and give my thoughts on it. Looking forward to the best boss thing you're doing. I would have nominated my boss, but we're a non-profit company and small compared to your stories, but have a super sports manager. I mean, they sound like an amazing. I promise I'll be doing extra series of this. I filmed one today. We filmed one yesterday. Sorry, not yesterday, on Friday, and we've got sort of 3 more, which was surprising at work, with a pride. Honestly, there's some amazing business and amazing people. So it's the piece of content I'm most excited to share with you all this year. Apart from doing this live with you all, of course. For graduate job assessment stages, does it matter what time of day I complete it? Like, do they have the data to say that I did it at 1 a.m. and base their decisions on that? No, not really. And also, even if you did complete at 1 a.m., like, I don't really see that being too much of a problem, because as long as it's within the timeline of agreed, I don't think that's a problem at all. And they wouldn't, even if they could, they wouldn't use that as like they wouldn't do it like that either. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'm not a big fan of job assessment stage at the best of times. I'm going to be doing a new video on that because I just find the whole system kind of soul destroying. But no, don't worry about that sort of thing. On the graduate side of things, by the way, if you are a graduate or junior looking for your first job, I'm such a big fan of starting with a small or medium-sized company rather than one of the big grad schemes. I really, really am. And I'm not, that's not to sort of, I don't want to like dampen your enthusiasm if you start a big company. Like, there's lots of pros to that. And I'm not here to sort of stand up. But if you're struggling or if you're not sure, you just get exposed to so much more as part of a small business, like so much more. And it's a great way to, if you're not sure what you want to do, it's a great way to try lots of new things. Whereas graduate schemes, you can get pigeonholed a little bit, and locked into kind of like an exam cycle. So it's just a sort of general thought. How is the best way to leave a job you're unhappy with and go and do the same thing I'm passionate about? When it comes to quitting your job, 2 things to bear in mind. Firstly, I do like you to give the news in person or over a Zoom call. Like, I know a lot of people don't like that, but I do think it's a good thing to do because I think you can catch any early signs. You can control the narrative a bit more and control that initial reaction from the boss. So I think that's a good way. Make sure you do it in writing and make sure you've checked all the details as well. So if you're going to quit, make sure you've checked how much your notice period is. Think about how much holiday you've had. That's the thing that always catches people out. People always think it's really unfair that people like lose some of their last salary because they prorated their holiday, but it's actually really not unfair at all, because otherwise what would happen, right, is 1st of Jan, everyone would take 3 weeks holiday, then they would hand in their notice, and then the business is technically paid for like all of their annual leave over the course of the year in those 3 weeks. So it's not unfair and it always catches people out. So I would just make sure you do that. And then if you think about the passion thing, if you look to monetize a passion, which I'm such a fan on, right? And one of the best things about the internet, it's a pretty toxic place at times, but one of the best things about it, beyond being introduced to me, obviously, is the fact that you can monetize passions now and hobbies, and share your knowledge that you have. You have these amazingly specific skill sets that we all have, and we can now share them with the world. So I would start that on the side, if I'm being honest. I would stay at the job just so you've got that income and still do the job. I'm not saying I'm not saying just wash your hands and do nothing. Like, do your day-to-day job, but then use that time of the weekends or in the evenings or something like that to start sort of building out a profile. And that way you kind of look after your income a little bit more. I'm a web developer and would consider myself a senior, as would my manager, but he said he can't promote me because he would have to promote everyone. Does that sound unreasonable, or is it just me? I mean, that doesn't sound unreasonable. That sounds bizarre. Why does he have to promote everyone? How does that work? Otherwise, you'd have like the most senior team in there with no one junior beneath. So I don't really understand that. I would question what he means by that because, yeah, I mean, if everyone's at the same skill level, then technically you should be promoting everyone. But I don't really understand how there's enough roles to promote everyone. So sorry if I've misunderstood that. Hello from Stacey. Hello back. Um, every time I apply for vacancies, it's mostly never hear back. And when I do hear back, it's normally to be reject. I've updated CV and not shown what else to do to improve my chances. Yeah, it's really hard to say with obviously without having it in front of you. But it has to be something to do with your CV, right? Because your personality is not even be giving a chance to come through in an interview or anything like that if you're not even getting to that stage. So, like logically, it has to be something that's going on with your CV. And so I would just keep A/B testing it. There are some like good tools that can like help sort of analyze job specs and work out what gives you the best chance. Like there are some good tools like that out there. But I would just keep trying variations of your CV until you start to see a bit of success because it's not like you've had 40 interviews and no one likes it. It means you've literally not even got to an interview stage, which means there's something going on with the application. If it's like a core missing thing, like it could be like a straight out like no degree or something like that, and a lot of jobs do require that, even though that's changing, which I'm glad about. I would start to look at smaller companies. That gives you your best opportunity to get like an entry level role. Start with a smaller company because they've got a slightly smaller reach. They're looking for candidates a bit more, and they're a bit more open to people with slightly different backgrounds. Whereas a lot of like the big companies will just say, right, it's an easy way to shave off 60% of the applicants is just say, right, anything below this grade level, for example, not happening. A personal question. Have you thought about what you would do for a job if you weren't an entrepreneur? Ooh, good question. I don't know, because I've got two businesses at the moment, right? I've got obviously all the content side of things, which I'm doing, and then I've got my green tech company, Gaia. I find green tech a really interesting space because it's sort of like commercial meets environment meets political, because there's a lot of like sort of political discussions around it all. I've always loved history, if I'm being honest. So I've always fancied the idea of being an archaeologist. I used to do that with my granddad when we were younger. Like we'd go like Flint, like digging for flint and stuff, and like in Iron Age forts. And so I think probably in the sort of history space, because I've always just really enjoyed that. Listen to a lot of podcasts about ancient history, and I grew up in Greece. I don't know if people knew that. So sort of first 10 years of my life I was in Greece, and so I sort of fell in love with all this sort of ancient side of things. So I suspect something in there, but it's very hard to say. What do you do if you are being totally ignored and bullied at work for getting on with the store manager? I mean, I mean, that's really hard. I'm really sorry, Summer. I mean, it's pretty childish what they're doing, right? Like, I think you have to accept that we like to think we leave school and people just start to behave a little bit better. And in the general, people do become more adults by definition, but stuff like that's just a little bit sad. And I'm really sorry. It's not fair on you at all. I mean, it help if, I don't know, like what the store manager does, like if they hate them or, whatever the reason. So it's really hard to know the context, but on paper, that just sounds really silly and unfair on you. It's really hard. Like the obvious solution would be like if it's really bad, to like talk to HR, talk to the store manager, and that's important if you're feeling like really like trodden down on. But obviously that's a tricky thing if these are peers that you have to work with. So it's really hard to know without the context. But I hope you're doing okay. That's horrible. Hi Ben. For a year now, I'm a manager of a team of customer service agents in the gaming industry, iGaming industry. E-gaming, some would say e-gaming industry. We are working mostly remote, and I have a hard time to find a way to create a "we are a team" feeling. Yeah, really good point. So some of the things I've seen quite recently is people just hang out on, like you have a hangout link, so you just kind of work. Even though you're working, not doing stuff with them, you're kind of on the link, so you can almost like chat. So I've seen sort of like breakout rooms work quite well like that. I would make sure you carve out the space to actually meet. Like I don't know if they're all over the country and stuff, which is possible, and that's a lot harder. But if you can like create an environment where people come and you say, right, half a day next Thursday, we're all going to meet here, and that there's ways to do that as well. The other thing is just keep checking in, just having those sort of huddles and those quick calls, starting the day together on an online call, even for 10 minutes. That works really well. Like just stuff like that just makes a big difference. But it's definitely the downside of remote working, right? If you're fully remote, is the lack of face time with other people, and that's an important part of it. It's why flexible working for me is the best way. Our management just invoked free seating in our office, even though employees voted against it no more than 6 months ago. People are not happy about it. They just invoked free seating. Do you mean hot desking? Or sure, people aren't charging for seats, are they? I assume you mean hot desking. I mean, it's silly, right? I never understand why when they put a vote and people like vote against it, they then go against the team because it's just going to hack people off exactly like that. So if you are, I mean, it's weird to ask people to vote. I mean, God, look at Brexit. Like asking people to vote sometimes never ends particularly well. But management just invoked free seating in our office, even though employees voted against it. No one 6 months ago. Yeah, I mean, I think that's crazy for a couple of reasons, and I'm not surprised people aren't happy about it. What questions would you recommend asking at an interview to avoid a business that works under a micromanagement style of working? I always like the question of why are you hiring the role? So why did that person move on? I think that's a really good question, and puts them on the spot, because what you want to hear, right, is they've been promoted or they've got an amazing opportunity elsewhere or something like that. What you don't want to hear is, oh, you're the third person to kind of take this job in the last 4 months, and we just want someone who's a sort of quitter and all that sort of thing. So that's step one. In regards to like how to identify micromanagement, ask who you're going to be reporting into. And that's a really good understanding, like what the sort of process is, because the sign up micromanagement is all about signing off or the lack of signing off. So asking who you're going to be working under is a really good question. And the final question I really like in interviewing is a bit broader: is there anything that might happen to the business in the next 6 months that might impact this role? And that's a really nice question to ask, just because first in, last in, first out is a legitimate challenge. And so when you're taking a new role, especially when companies are cutting numbers, it's something to sort of bear in mind. Just popped on to say how much I love your channel, Vicky. Thank you very much, Vicky. That's very kind. What can be done about a new team member that has rubbed the whole team the wrong way, I think is the question. First, you got to talk to the new team member and find out what's going on, right? So when I talk about good bosses, I'm talking about competency. I'm not talking about just always being a nice person, because sometimes as the boss, you do need, you need to make the hard decisions, and you need to be the tough person, for want of a better phrase, and all of that sort of thing. So if there's someone who's hacking off the whole team, you have to put a stop to that. Now, step one, you got to find out what's going on. There could be something dreadful going on in their personal life that's always worth asking. If it's something out of character, obviously they're new, so it probably isn't this. But if someone who used to be great and now usually it's something going on in personal life and it's worth finding out, sometimes it's just not a good fit. Sometimes a new team member, I mean, they're new, so I would be quite stern and make it very clear that what they're doing is wrong. I'm not saying you go straight in and fire them straight away. So give them a chance, make it clear, give specific examples. When you give feedback, right, don't just say you're rubbing the whole team the wrong way. You have to say, look, in this scenario, this annoyed this person for this reason, this happened. Like, be specifics, make people really understand. Like, feedback, it's all about being specific. But if they keep doing that, you can't keep them in the business. It's not fair on the rest of the team, right? And it's not great for you either, because if your whole team's hacked off, you're not going to be getting much work done. If you ever get a chance, I think you should watch the intern interview scene in Emily the Criminal. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. By all means, tag me in it and I will take a look. But it's a curious title. Is it a film or a series? It's not like Emily in Paris, is it? What can I do? What can I do if, when I was hired, I was promised someone else will be hired to help on my department, and I voiced my concerns more and more as being expected of me in my role? Look, this happens a lot. It depends what your relationship is, right, with them. Okay, you can make it very clear that you won't stay if they don't support you. And you can do that in a respectful way, but like, you can also make it clear that the damage it's doing. So the other thing I like to do is, if you can tie it to a revenue, it becomes a much more compelling. And look, you're right. Like, you should be trust enough where if someone's senior in my company says, look, I'm absolutely dying on my feet here, I need support, I do like to think I listen to that, because that's going to damage me in the long run, right? Because if people get mistakes start to sneak in, clients get annoyed, revenue gets damaged, and all of that. So it's absolutely my best interest as an entrepreneur to make sure my team are as happy as possible. And look, it doesn't work, right, all the time. No one's perfect. Team gets busy, things slip up, all of that sort of thing. It happens, but you can try and mitigate it and reduce the percentage or the likelihood of it happening. I would try and tie into revenue and say, look, I think we're going to lose these clients unless we get more support, for example. Or, if it does get to sort of that scorched earth policy, I would just say, I'm really sorry. Look, I can't keep doing this. It's not fair. You keep promising me. If you don't support me soon, I'm afraid I'm probably going to have to look for a new role or something like that. Because think about this, right? That puts you in a quite good position of power, because if they can't do that, can you imagine what the other one, can you imagine if you need one person already, can you imagine how bad it would be without two? Sorry, we're all different skill levels. I have a lot more responsibility than others, and those are not recognized their current reasoning. Character limit makes it difficult to elaborate. So Luke, just for those, Luke is, I believe, is the one You're sorry, there's a lot of questions, so it's hard to pin down. But I believe you're the one who your boss said he can't promote you because then you have to promote everyone. I would just make that very clear then. I would just make that really clear, and like if you're that important, like they won't want to lose you. And so I think you've got to question what they mean, because if they say I got to promote everyone because we're on the same skill level, you can then say, well, actually we're not. So I would really push them for reasons to why they think need to promote everyone, because surely that's going to cost them loads. Presumably that comes with everyone gets a pay rise as well, so that's not going to be in their benefit at all. So I would take a look at that. How do I make a manager understand the new team member we have who has rubbed everyone the wrong way and lowered morale? I've mentioned some of the issues to management, but nothing has changed. Yeah, that's really tricky as well. I think you just keep telling the manager. And I think you kind of, if other people can also voice the complaints as well, there's sort of that really helps as well. Like if you hear it, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be trusted on your own, I think you should, but if half the team say it, right, they kind of have to pay attention. So I would encourage other people to mention it as well. I don't know how big the team is, so obviously if it's just you and them, that's obviously trickier. But I'll just keep pursuing, and I try and be really specific as well, and just say, look, this is what's happened. Look, I'm not trying to dob in people in and all that sort of thing. I just want to kind of make it clear. It's really hard as one of the colleagues is my best friend of 30 plus years. The manager's wonderful. She's the most supportive person I've ever known. Thank you. So Summer's essentially being bullied at work because her manager, she gets on with her manager. So her colleagues is bullying her, which I just think is so pathetic from her colleagues. Yeah, look, I mean, if the manager's wonderful, then I just don't know what they're playing at. But obviously, if your colleague is your best friend of 30 years, it sounds like there's something different. Obviously, I don't know the context, but if it's your best friend of 30 years, that sounds like something else is going on, if I'm being really honest. Like maybe it's a bit of jealousy. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know. But it's weird that best friend of 30 years is bullying you because you're getting on with your manager. That just something doesn't quite connect for me there. But obviously, I'm very sorry you're going through that. That sounds really tough. One story from a fast food job I have is I once had an area manager force a 17-year-old girl to have an allergic reaction to prove she had an allergy to a soap. Should this manager have been fired? I mean, yes. Forget fired. What? You went fast, and the area manager forced a 17-year-old girl to have an allergic reaction to prove she had an allergy to soap. My God, that's absolutely wild. Yes, obviously she should have been fired, and a lot more besides. That's crazy. What's the reasoning behind a manager making it difficult for me to go to a dentist compared to what other colleagues have to do? As in, like, when your other colleagues go to the dentist, that's easier for them to do. I mean, the manager shouldn't really make difficult to go to a dentist. I mean, it's quite common sometimes for them to say, look, do you mind just working a bit late one week, just catch up on work if things are really busy. But mostly if you need to go to a dentist, go to a dentist. Like, come on, that's just like life stuff. And work shouldn't inhibit that. Hi, Ben. My friend's asking if you're single. I'm married, actually. But thank you very much to your friend. It's not biz related, but let's say you get a loan from a friend and you inform him on an agreed date, you maybe be late. Should he lose it on you? No, he should. I mean, he shouldn't, right? But it's probably like a little bit of a shame thing coming through if he's losing it on you. I don't know. Sorry, I don't quite understand that question. If you got the loan from a friend. Oh, I see. So if you get a loan from a friend and you inform him on an agreed date, you maybe be late. Should he lose on you? I mean, it's tricky, right? If you have an agreed date and like you've missed it, that's obviously like technically that he's got a right to sort of say what's going on. Obviously it depends how he lost it on you. So yeah, that's a tricky one. Found your videos out of nowhere and I love them. Well done. Thank you very much. It's a film. Sorry, that's related to the previous comment. Sorry about that. How would you handle an employee who's been with a company for 10 years but still doesn't get their job and can't communicate with anyone except their manager? I mean, I would potentially go down a performance route. I mean, if it's taken them 10 years to get the job and they're still not getting it right, like that doesn't suggest it's the best fit for them. But obviously 10 years is a long time and they've done you like a long service. I wouldn't just be sort of straight to the get rid of them point, but I would certainly have a performance review. Like it depends what type of business is, right? But if everyone's putting the problem with underperformers in a company, right, is it's very rarely the manager that gets impacted. It's often the other team ending up having to pick up slack and stuff like that. So if they don't get their job and can't communicate with anyone, and other team having to pick up the slack because they're not doing a very good job, that's just not fair. And it's not right, and you're not going to grow your business. And so it helps no one having people like that. I would speak to them. Obviously, it's been 10 years. Depends how well they've been managed as well, and all of that. There's so many parts of that. But I would put on some sort of performance review to kind of make sure they're sort of on track. But yeah, that's the tricky one. It depends how much of an impact it's having on everyone else as well, is what I would say to that, and how much of an impact it is in problem in general. Ben, I work at a third-party customer service company, works for a state agency. Last year, I was promoted from my normal posting to a role as a backup quality assurance agent. The QA SUP was fired, and a lead agent then resigned because they promoted someone over her. I was then ghosted as a backup member of the team. In the last few months, they had 2 open roles for full-time QA spots. I applied and received the email they were getting a different direction. It appears I was blacklisted for being connected to the previous QA teams, as well as having intermittent medical leave that I used when needed. Am I wrong to use that QA job on my resume while looking for another job, even though I was only a backup? Use a QA job on your resume. Just do, because QA job's all about getting you through into the interview. Right? I have no issues with people like slightly exaggerating on their CV. And I don't even think that's necessarily an exaggeration, because as soon as you start to put backup, they're just going to think it looks a bit strange. And you can then tell them in the interview, right? And say, look, actually in the career, I was doing this, this, and this. I was the backup. And if they're good enough, they will spot that and ask questions and talk about getting you. But you sound more than qualified for those types of jobs. Put it on your CV, have a proper chat in the interview. You can be upfront about how that worked, because that all sounds like a bit of a mess. But they will question you. Like a good interviewer will question on your technical skills, and that's where you show if you can or can't do it. So I would absolutely put that on your CV. I've had a few interviews where the employer asks first up, what hours are you available? And I state my hours availability, and then they spend the rest of the interview telling me to be flexible. How should I approach this? Because it feels like a waste of my time. Yeah, I mean, it is a waste of your time, if I'm being honest. I don't really understand what they're doing, because there's no point asking what's your hours available, and then you tell them, and then they spend the rest of their hours trying to say, oh, we need the other hours. Because like, if you could do the other hours, you presumably would have said that, right? So I think it does sound like a waste of your time, if I'm being honest. It sounds really silly from them, and they're going to lose out on people like that. So I would question what's going on. It depends what the job is as well, because a lot of people think you need to be way more flexible for jobs than you actually do. Like I had this weird one. I think I did a YouTube video on it the other day. Where they're sort of saying, oh, that was it. It was one of the Shark Tank guys. I can't remember his name. The sort of old bald one. And he sort of said, oh, like, oh, people should be flexible. Like, what if I have an emergency at 2 a.m.? And I was just thinking, I'm sorry, if you've got businesses that are having emergencies at 2 a.m., get in the right time zone. Like, what are you doing? Why? Like, if it's got stuff happening at 2 a.m., you're working in the wrong part of the world. Like, move to a place where, or start an office where people are awake at 2 a.m. because it's actually 4 p.m. for them, where they can actually deal with the problem. So, yeah, flexibility I find weird. I think, all of that. Got some great work-related stories. Where can I share them with you? So if they're like text messages and stuff, like I often read out, the email in my various bios, depending which social channel you follow me on, is the best one to get me at. If it's just like a sort of chunk of text, then DMs in social. But emails is probably best for me. That's what tends to be where we get most of the stories from. I asked the manager to take a day off or so off due to a visible dental access. He said my face looked the same on both sides. Oh my God. Some people they really don't help themselves, do they? Opinions on coming into the office 15, 20 minutes late due to train delays or traffic wasn't an issue until I requested more work from home days. My previous manager moved on within the company, had no issues. This new manager is picking out faults in ridiculous matters. I mean, company won't allow me to make up the time in lunch, but again, this wasn't even been brought to me until my request for more work from home days. I mean, look, I think it's crazy. Like, look, this new manager sounds particularly picky, and I'm not a big fan of picky. It's the opposite of my management style. My management style comes with challenges as well. Like, I certainly don't have the perfect style, but stuff like that would never bother me. In fact, a lot of people have that challenge, right? Because the team come into London, and inevitably there are train delays at some point. I mean, the fact they won't just let you make it up for lunch or stuff like that is just really. It depends, right? Like, if you have a thing we have, like, for example, a great example is, I had a young team member, and she sometimes his train is late, and that's absolutely fine. And we're in the office 5, 10, 15 minutes, no worries. It happens. She makes up time on the train, all that sort of stuff. But every now and again, we have to be there for 9 o'clock because we've got a big client meeting or we've got a trade show or something like that. And at that point, you say, look, we need to be on time. So you need to kind of make sure that you catch the earlier train if you think there's a chance. And so it's about like taking ownership of your role in your sort of career. But actually, the reality is that sounds petty. That just sounds really petty to me. I don't see any issue with coming in, especially as like it's not your fault. Trains happen. It's not like it's happening every day, etc. So yeah, I'm not sure. I feel sorry for you to be under that person. They sound a bit petty. I'm sure you've read Bullshit Jobs. What do you think of the argument that managers are completely unnecessary and really pointless to the running of a business? I've actually not read that book. It sounds like it could be up my street. But no, like I said, I actually said earlier on this video that it's not something I talk about very often. I think managers are incredibly important. The reason why I think they're important, right, is they can be the single most constructive thing and single most destructive thing in a business. Because the problem is that if you've got someone who doesn't manage anyone, they can only damage themselves in a lot of ways. Yes, they can damage things sideways, like make different things difficult for other colleagues. But if you've got a manager who manages 10 people, like that's 10 jobs you could be really sort of messing up, or it could be 10 jobs you actually bring the absolute best in. So a good manager motivates a team, gets them inspired. Like their productivity for their team is enormous. It can be so valuable to business, like so valuable. And equally, it can be an absolute fiasco. So I haven't read the argument in summary, but I would really struggle, I think, to be convinced that managers are completely unnecessary and really pointless, because I just disagree. How would you decline a job offer where the job interview did nothing but showcase red flags? I want to remain professional and maybe apply as a contract again when management changes. I would just kind of white lie it a little bit, if I'm being honest. If you want to sort of maintain that professionality, don't focus on the negatives because, again, they could be a good option for you. So find a positive reason to reject it. I've got an amazing offer elsewhere. Like if you're a contract, for example, just say you've got a phenomenal contract elsewhere, but thank you so much, be polite, all that sort of thing. So focus on the positives rather than the negatives. I guess the obvious question would be, if there's so many red flags, would you want to go back? But I totally respect the idea of not burning bridges. And I think that's an important lesson, right? Because you've got to be selfish for yourself. And burning bridges is, although feels very good in the moment, rarely ends up as a great move for you personally. I don't know if you've gone to uni, but if you have, how do you balance lectures, your own study time, job interview, assessments, a weekend job, as well as a personal life? I feel like I'm drowning. I did go to uni. Back in the day, I went to Warwick University, had a great time. But yeah, it's hard, right? And I think you just have to think about it. You have to prioritize. Obviously, I did a degree that probably didn't have a huge amount of contact time. So I probably got a bit lucky there. But yeah, it's hard. I think you just got to try and carve out the time and like be disciplined, have sort of to-do lists, but also like kind of enjoy it, right? Uni's a phenomenal time. Like I know it's very easy for me to say in my position, but like don't miss out on enjoying university or college because you're so worried. Like make sure you carve out the time to kind of enjoy those moments because you will look back and miss them for sure. Thank you, Ben. Absolutely love your videos and advice. Thanks, George. Really appreciate that. Oh, by the way, I forgot to thank you for doing one of my stories on TikTok and YouTube. It's a good boss story, though. You're very welcome. Please do share. I do good boss stories as well, I promise. But you're very welcome. I can't remember which one that was, but I'm very glad it got shared. What specific tools and safe websites do you recommend for CV checking? I've partnered with a brand called Teal before, and I've sort of worked with them a little bit, and I've been really impressed with them. I think Teal is a good one to look at, and it's probably the only one I've really used. So I would say that's the best one that I can actually recommend. But there are good ones out there for sure. And that's the thing. I mean, there's one of the things I wanted to share with you guys because I just found this absolutely crazy. I'm going to switch the screen slightly so you can see this. But this is wild, right? So someone sent me this, I think it was yesterday. And it's basically a snippet of their contract. And this is what I mean, right? So a lot of my content, and I really do mean this, is based on I'm trying to help businesses as much as I'm helping team members because I want, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years. I like businesses. I like successful businesses. I want people to do well. I want people to have incredibly profitable companies and all that sort of thing. I just happen to think the best way to do that is to have a motivated team as possible. That's just my belief. But sometimes you do see things and you just go, how on earth is this person in charge? And but so I don't know if you can read this. Sorry, I actually can't. So I'm gonna have to expand that. But basically, in their contract, they sort of said, "We do not tolerate sickness or handling back calls. We are not an agency. We do not have carers standing by to cover care calls. We cannot leave our clients without care." Now, I'm gonna do a TikTok and short and Instagram video on this because I just found this so ridiculous. Because what they're basically trying to do is they're trying to replace law, actual law in a country, with a contract. And surely they know that an employment contract doesn't supersede a country's law. Like, the idea that that's possible is absolutely crazy. So I've got no idea how they thought this was a sensible thing to do. And so I just look at it sometimes. I just go, my word, like, how? Otherwise, you could literally have, like, you are now allowed to break any law. Do you see what I mean? Like, you could have, like, you could steal what you want. It's just absolutely crazy. I have no idea what they're thinking about. Uh, Do you mean anything? Because I would love to know why you filmed so close to the curtain. Just kidding. Love your That's a fair question. I think I don't know, to be honest. I've kind of got, like, quite a narrow setup here. I'm in a flat in London, so I just kind of have the curtain as a close thing. But obviously, I can look to redesign it. But yes, I do mean anything. Ask any questions like that. But yes, I didn't think people would notice that. But fair enough. Thanks for the AMA. So I don't know what AMM is. How do you equate salary to experience? My company hired 2 senior level people at a pretty significant rate above mine. I mean, the obvious question is, what can they do that you can't? If there's lots they can do, it's probably fair enough. I'm a big, when you take experience, do you mean skill level or do you mean years served? Because those are 2 different things, in my opinion. I am a big believer in rewarding skills over experience. So, for example, just because someone's had 6 years experience and someone's had 3 years experience, I'm kind of viewing, well, if they can do the same thing, right, after that amount of time, surely the 3-year person is actually better because they've got to that level quicker. So it depends. So if they've got a significant rate above mine and they are way worse than you absolutely should be talking to someone and speaking to your manager and being quite upfront about it and say, I don't understand why they're getting more. Equally, if they are significantly better than you at certain things, and obviously I couldn't know less about the context, then I would perhaps say, that they might have more of a case for it. One positive story for my new job is that I've been working there for 6 months, 45-hour weeks, and earned a promotion in comparison to the fast food job I worked 7 years, 80 weeks, and never offered one. Well, that's a great piece of news, and congratulations. I am very pleased to hear that. My manager is working to get me a raise, and despite being named as the lead on projects, they were brought in to lead. I've been told I shouldn't expect to see a raise to their level as I have less CV. Does that mean less experience? So I don't understand that one, I'm afraid. What's your best tips for managing a team? Look, my best tips for asking a team, look, is firstly, ask them what they want. I really do mean that. It's crazy to me how few people try that move. Just say to them, look, especially if you're a new manager and you're moving into an established team, just have a meeting with them. Say, look, I'm here to try and get the best out of you. How do you work best? What do you need from me? What can I do? I can't promise you the moon, but there might be things I can do that make your life a lot easier. Like, what's the quick wins? Quick wins are great for a team, right? Because they show that you're making progress. That's why politicians love quick wins and they never do anything about, like, long-term stuff. Is because it's the same principle, right? People want to see an immediate impact. So quick wins is a great start for a managing team. What are the things that really annoy you that I can sort out straight away? Really quick things for you. The second thing is, like, have a goals and set targets with them personally. Set team targets and make people for part of the team, but actually set personal targets. Say, look, if you achieve this, I'm going to give you that, and make it a very. And if they don't do it, you don't give them that. But, like, people like to have a target, right? And as long as you can track that, it's great. And then I would just ask them, just keep talking to them, keep making sure you carve out that time. You say, look, don't use one-on-ones for catch-ups. Like, have catch-ups about other, like, work later. The one-on-one with your team should be, I need you to tell me all the things that you're struggling with. Tell me the things you're liking, so I might be able to do more for you. But I want you to tell all the things you're struggling with, and I'm going to tell you the things I think I would like to see improvements on, and have that space to have that conversation. Experience they do. I'm not sure how I should feel. Sorry, I missed that bit. Have you considered providing management training to enhance the company's operations? Yes, absolutely. I'm a big fan of management training. I might do a management course at some point just to help people out. But I would do it so that only businesses can pay for it, if that makes sense. 'Cause I don't like people paying for their own management training. I think that should be a business cost. AMA, ask me anything. Sorry. Sorry, I should have picked that up. Yes, please do ask me anything. Where will you go when you die? Heaven or hell? Only followers of Jesus will be saved. I'd like to think it's more down to good people, whether you're good or not, rather than necessarily your religion. But obviously, I do not know where I'll go when I die. I would love your opinion on this. What is up with jobs that are 100% remote, but you need to live in a certain country or city? From an EU point of view, or within the same country, but a specific city? Yes, good question. So there are technicalities. So there are things around like and obviously that's not necessarily EU, but there are countries where you can't employ people without like offices and stuff. So you got to be a little bit careful. Like South Africa is quite a popular one, right? But like you can't have a South African employee without like a South African director and stuff like that. So really South Africa popular is because you can work in the summer during our winter, but it's on the same timeline, which is why it's becoming quite a popular destination. So it really depends on the country you're talking about. So there are genuine, legitimate reasons why you can't do that. There is always like I'm kind of with you. Like, what's the difference between remote working like in this and if you're in Lisbon versus London when it's the same thing? It's time difference makes a difference as well. So we've had people like work out in sort of Thailand for, and we do offer that. Like for my content business, I sort of say you can work anywhere for a couple of weeks, a year, and all that sort of stuff. But obviously timeline becomes trickier. But if you have to wake up really early or work late and stuff like that, so that can be a challenge. So it does depend. But broadly speaking, I've got no issues. If you're 100% remote, you should absolutely be able to work in a certain city or country, providing there's no like additional logistical challenges. I don't see any reason why. Hi Ben, pop quiz. Why did I get an official warning for my new job? A colleague blamed me for their rookie mistake. B, my boss didn't like my accent. Or C, I took too long while throwing up. Wow. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd have to ask what your accent is because there are a few that potentially. No, I'm kidding, of course. I feel like you're about to tell me all of the above because they're too different. But please do let me know if I'm right. What do you like to do in your spare time? Love sport. Play a lot of sport. Watch a lot of sports. I do a lot of reading. Sort of obviously hang out with my wife and friends. Like I don't think I'm that different in that sense. But yeah, I'd say my main. I do like gaming as well. Actually, I do have a soft spot for gaming from my uni and school days. They want you within a certain distance to one of the main offices in case you need to swap out equipment. That's the case with my remote gig. Yeah, that's stupid. That is dumb. One, because you're like losing out on good talent, right? Two, you're hacking people off for something that's very unlikely to happen. And see, like you can kind of like things are pretty accessible these days, so you should be able to swap them out pretty quickly anyway. So yeah, I think that's silly personally. You're not really remote if you have to potentially be on call to come into the office. So I think that's silly. Right, we're coming up to the end of the hour, so I will finish off there unless there's any final questions. Do people like me? My plan was to do these once a week at this time for the next few weeks and see how it goes. Obviously, if you don't want me to, if people are fed up with my voice already, please do let me know. But if you would like me to kind of carry on with these, if you find them useful at all, let me know. Otherwise, I hope I will chat to you all later. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in for my very first live stream. So apologies if I'll get the tech better. Ask Ben Anything probably isn't the catch's title, so I'll probably have to think about that. I'll absolutely move away from the curtain as per request. But yeah, please do let me know if there's anything else I can do. But otherwise, yeah, I look forward to catching up with you some other time. Have a fab evening all. I would let you to carry on. I promise I'll be back next week. I promise. Please do let me know any other questions. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Take care all. Bye-bye.